Just a moment. It's okay. Hello and good morning. I'm Leonardo McClarty, President of Howard County Chamber, and here with Josh Bokee of Comcast. And we both would like to welcome you once again to Policy Matters, where we talk each Monday with a member of the Howard County General Assembly delegation on policy matters that would be of interest to those of you in Howard County as well as the surrounding area. And so we're excited to have with us this morning Delegate Vanessa Atterbeary, who's certainly no stranger to Howard Countyans and the Chamber, having visited with us at multiple occasions. And so Delegate Atterbeary, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Good to see you both.
Excellent, excellent. And so certainly, Josh, want to allow you this moment to bring any words on behalf of Comcast.
Sure. Well, good morning, Leonardo. Good morning, Delegate Atterbeary. And on behalf of Comcast, it's great to be here. During the pandemic, of course, we have made it a priority to keep our customers and community connected. And in that spirit, that's one of the reasons we have been a great sponsor, glad to sponsor the Policy Matters discussions, because it's another way of keeping members connected to their local delegation. Looking forward to the conversation this morning.
Well, excellent. Well, we will jump right in, recognizing that this is a busy day, although I guess during the General Assembly and after crossover, every day is a busy day. But for those that may not be familiar with you or some of the things that you're involved in, you currently serve in the House of Delegates. You were first elected back in 2014 and ultimately have been a member of the House since 2015. Some current assignments, you sit on the Judiciary Committee, which you're the vice chair, and you also chair the Public Safety Subcommittee, and also a member of the Family and Juvenile Law Subcommittee, which certainly we know that family matters of all sorts are one of those things that are near and dear to your heart, as we can see from just looking at your background here.
Office, right.
But no, that is always a good thing for sure. And so maybe just to jump right in, tell us from your vantage point, how has this session been progressing, whether that's via committee, whether that's things you're just focusing on yourself, things you're looking at. Kind of talk about the session thus far.
So it's been really busy. And as you kind of mentioned, today is crossover Monday. So all the bills from the House have to cross over to the Senate if they have any hope of surviving and passing the entire General Assembly. So we're going to have a really, really long day on the floor. We were here all day Saturday until late in the day. And the past couple weeks have been pretty busy. I mean, you know, all day, late evenings, late nights, actually, early mornings. I also have had the opportunity to chair the House's Police Reform and Accountability Work Group that the Speaker and the chair of my committee, Luke Clippinger, implemented on May 30th following the murder of George Floyd. So that has been significant work done during the interim, and then particularly when we got back here in the House, getting the legislation through the Public Safety Subcommittee and then through Judiciary, and then getting it through the House. But we did a week or so ago pass sweeping reform, police reform and accountability that I'm incredibly proud of through the House. And the Senate has, of course, chosen to pass a variety of bills, which we will hear this week, and then we'll have to come together during conference committee and work out what we're going to pass as a whole. So it's been incredibly busy from that standpoint. And we also have other bills in our committee besides policing. So it's been, and you know, it's just different. Like we're here virtually, you know, all of our committee hearings have been virtually for up until now. You know, it wasn't until maybe a month in that I actually started coming down to Annapolis for floor sessions on the House. But even when we're here, we're in our office doing Zoom meetings, doing our committee hearings and voting sessions virtually. So it just has a different feel. You miss seeing everybody. I sit in what we call the annex, which is in the House office building and not on the House floor. So I don't see those people necessarily. So it has a different feel, but we're managing, and we're still able to do a lot of great things to help Marylanders.
And so speaking of police reform and you mentioned the legislation that has passed the House, kind of talk a little bit about what are some of those changes and at least from a House perspective, and maybe the why behind the change for those that may not be following it very closely.
Okay, so I'll touch on some because it's a huge bill. The House chose to pass one large bill, and it's House Bill 670. If anybody wants to look it up on the website. And so some of the key points: we repealed the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. We created a structure for accountability, including implicit bias testing, including training for officers, including an early warning system to identify folks who violated the use of force. We created a use of force statute, so force will be clearly identified all throughout the state of Maryland, and all departments, there are 148 police departments, will be required to abide by the same use of force matrix and use the same disciplinary, matrix, which isn't being done now. We're requiring folks to use body cams by 2025. We also banned chokeholds. We banned shooting at moving vehicles. And we passed sweeping reform as it relates to police records. So that was a big issue, being able to look at police disciplinary records. So barring, certain information that is obviously confidential, like, date of birth, address, and things like that. We passed, I think that's the only thing we agreed with the Senate on, full transparency and those records. So we were able to do a lot of great things. Scholarships and loan repayments for Marylanders who attend a public institution and commit for 5 years to a local police department, and for current police officers, loan repayment programs, so that we can keep good folks here, and recruit minorities here as well.
Well, excellent. I know it was an arduous task and something you've been working on that task force for several months now, and certainly can commend the group for the work and the research that took place and so forth. And so we're going to, spend a little bit more time here. I know we're going to also talk a little bit about the peace orders legislation that you've been a champion on the past few years. But while we're talking about kind of public safety, I want to just also mention and maybe get your thoughts. I know one of the other areas that you've been very involved in that's related somewhat has also been the subject around resource officers in schools, in which for those in many cases, resource officers might be just commonly referred to as school police. But if you could kind of talk a little bit about your work in that arena, and perhaps what, if anything, has come through that.
So interestingly, I was not aware. I'm of the age where we did not have SROs in the schools. I attended high schools, middle and elementary, all public schools right here in Howard County. And so they were implemented after I graduated in 93. They were implemented, I think it was 96. And so I had a local bill that would remove student resource officers from schools. There's a statewide bill to remove student resource officers. Well, there was two, and they kind of did different things. Actually, there was three, and one is going to pass. It doesn't remove them though. But in terms of my work on it, I actually became aware of SROs through my police work because, pretty much everyone thought that the Judiciary Committee dealt with SROs, but we didn't. It went through Ways and Means Committee as a part of education. So I took the interim to become familiar. I met with a lot of folks from different jurisdictions, my colleagues, and people, quite frankly, were all over the place. And I felt, after I learned some things that were going on here in Howard County, that I would put a bill in to remove the SROs. I think that is the right thing to do for our county. I say that it's necessarily the right thing to do across the state and in other parts of the state. I feel I understand what's going on in our county, but the city has different challenges. Other counties have different challenges. So I'm not sure that a one size fits all is the best approach. But I took a look at data in terms of arrests from Howard County. And first, the SROs are in middle schools. They're not in elementary schools. They're middle schools and high schools. And they're located in Howard County at the schools that have the highest free and reduced meals programs. which is concerning because those are the highest minority populations. The majority of the arrests have been minorities and also students with disabilities who are disproportionately minorities. And so that's just the fact for folks who like to rely on data. Those are the numbers. And a lot of those, to take it a step further, the Office of the Public Defender and some other attorneys shared with me cases where information learned in the schools is used to obtain no-knock warrants for, maybe the student's home or some other home, which we actually, in our sweeping police reform, we put tighter restrictions on no-knock warrants. So there's an incredibly high threshold that would have to be met at this point. And so based on that, based on the fact that the school board has been unable to reach a decision, they've been working on this since September. They've had a town hall, they had smaller focus groups. Their first vote that they took, it was tied. So the motion, I think that the student school board member made failed. And then they met again and essentially said, we're going to punt it and kick it to the end of when the legislature gets out and see if they take any action. And so to me, it seemed like they were unable to make the decision. I generally, folks who know me, I like to stay in my lane, but I thought this was such a huge issue. And I mean, the students, when you talk to, African-American students, brown students, they feel uncomfortable. They have a completely different feeling when they're in the school and they see the student resource officer. And I absolutely understand the perspective of our police here in Howard County. I don't paint all police as a broad brush of being bad. I share the story many times that my grandmother, who's 91, is a retired sheriff right outside of Detroit, Michigan. So I have that perspective too. And we certainly need our police and we need to rely on our police, but we're also in just a state right now where I think police reform should apply to all police. And the function of the SROs in Howard County, according to their MOU, it's a police function. And if they want to continue to do the other wonderful things that they do, which is needed to build relationships with students so that we all have a great, relationship with the police in our community, I think the school system can figure out a way to do that through some other sort of MOU. But I don't think that we need police and security assistants because they're both in the schools. That's kind of, overload. So I am incredibly passionate about it. And unfortunately, no action was taken on my bill in the local delegation because we're no longer meeting. So there was no action going to be taken on it this session.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and certainly can say that I've learned something, which I always do during these discussions and so forth. Josh?
So in addition, Delegate, to police reform and SRO, Leonardo started to mention it, but you've got other legislation, very busy session for you, especially with your background with family law. Wondering maybe talk a little bit about the peace order related legislation you proposed, maybe some of the other family law measures that you proposed too.
Thank you. So this is the workplace peace order. I have to start off by thanking the chamber. This is I think the second year I've brought the bill, and both times the chamber has come out in support. And in fact, an active member of the chamber, Cheryl Brown, has just worked. I mean, she and I sat down together and came up with the idea and have worked really closely on this. And so I have done a lot of work on domestic violence legislation, which I'm passionate about. And so the peace order simply tracks the current peace order language, but extends it to an employer so that an employer can obtain a peace order for their place of business, for their employees, and for their invitees for specific reasons that are listed in the statute for, harassment over the telephone, email, stalking, and those types of things. So it's very specific things. And of course, they would have to be proven. And I think this is incredibly important considering the times that we're in. We saw just what happened with the shooting of the massage parlors. And actually, this legislation could have played a key role in Hartford County a few years ago where there was the shooting at the Rite Aid. and at a granite countertop facility where they were disgruntled employees. And so this gives the opportunity of the employer to go in and seek relief, even if the individual who is being harassed doesn't feel comfortable going in and asking the court, the employer still can. And I didn't know, I've learned since I started this effort that this is a huge issue for nurses. It was their number one priority this year and last year, the Maryland Nurses Association, because of all of the harassment that they receive working in hospitals. I was unaware of this. So it's an incredibly important bill. We have passed it both times out of the House. The Senate, I know it's come out of their committee. It has not passed the full Senate. I know it passed in a different posture than how the House passed it. So I'm really hoping we can just all be on the same page and pass it this year and not have to try again for another year.
And just as a follow-up there, I mean, because, as you mentioned, we've supported it the past couple of years, and for us at least, and certainly we're looking at things through a business lens and with employee safety at mind. But if I'm just curious as to on the Senate side, where there has been, enough opposition at least for it not to pass, what have been perhaps the concerns there, at least to the point where they didn't feel comfortable enough with enough of a majority to pass the legislation?
So in the Senate committee, if we're talking about valid concerns, I don't know that any exist. I think some folks just philosophically don't agree with peace orders. I know that last year it was on the floor of the Senate. It died on sine die on third reader with like 20 minutes to go. And a member tried to attach a whole nother bill to it at the last minute. And so it died. So hopefully we can avoid all of that drama and get it done early this year. I think they attached an amendment on it that the trial lawyers asked for related to immunity. So I have to take a look at the language and see, and we'll see.
And so I guess maybe another question just on that note is and again, this is for a little bit of education for those watching. When you mention the fact that there may be some that just philosophically may not agree with peace orders, let's maybe just quickly kind of, I guess then let's define exactly what is a peace order for those that may be watching to say, well, why don't they agree with it? Or what is a peace order in the first place?
So when we're just talking about stepping outside of the employer-employee relationship, when we're just talking about just regular individuals, you can get a peace order or you can get a protective order. So you could get a protective order if you have an intimate relationship with somebody. And so the peace order framework was put into place if you don't have that intimate relationship with someone. So, perhaps it's your neighbor or someone else that you know. And there's different parameters put on both. So we took the peace order construct and put it in the framework of an employer. So, if I'm having a situation with Josh and we don't have an intimate relationship, but I feel like he's threatening me through emails, he's calling, harassing me on the phone, he's stalking me, then I could go to the court and ask for a peace order against him. If Josh and I had an intimate relationship, which I know is fiance, she's amazing. So, but if we had an intimate relationship, then I wouldn't ask for a peace order. I would ask for a protective order for protection from him for those things. And both have the same. You can ask the court that the individual stay away from your home, from your place of business, from a school, and that they not do those things, threaten, stalk, and all of that. So this takes the peace order construct and says, okay, an employer can go in and say, Josh has been calling and threatening, Vanessa, who works here, and he's been, emailing, coming by, and all those things. And if the employer can prove it, then Josh will have to stay away from the place of business.
Delegate, it just, one, I learned something I didn't know from here today, but it just, during our conversations with both yourself and your colleagues, it's such a great reminder about the nitty gritty of importance of the legislative work. And I think a lot of folks don't necessarily think about that always with the Maryland General Assembly. You've got these large bills, a number of which you have shepherded through, like with the police reform bill. But these are, there are a lot of legislative matters that do have an impact and a meaningful impact in terms of just how folks go about their lives or during business. That is just, it's always a helpful reminder, I think, for folks to realize just how much is happening out there and how much it is to, kind of get through that process and be detailed oriented on it.
I appreciate that.
Well, and Josh, I think you're correct. And it's one of the things that I've said at the chamber. Oftentimes people see, whether it's us or other advocacy groups, whether that's pro or con against an issue, they just see the stance that is taken. And oftentimes they don't have the opportunity to maybe see some of the nuances that's in the language, which ultimately cause you to take a position that you take. And so fundamentally, you may agree with the position of the legislation, but then when you look at perhaps implementation or definitions, that's where some of the differences come into play. And that's where, again, sometimes trying to follow all of these nuances and changes that take place, as you mentioned, and sometimes the back and forth and the subtle differences that can take place between what happens on the Senate side and the House side. And then if there's any type of, I guess, for lack of a better word, reconciliation, when you have maybe two bills of a similar nature and you have to figure out, okay, how do we work together? It's truly, as the old saying goes, it's watching the sausage get made. And so that could sometimes be a little difficult. But, I was
just going to say, the saying all politics is local. I mean, it really is. I mean, we've been able to do things here in Maryland that, hopefully at the federal level, they'll be able to get done. But they're taking on gun legislation now for people where that's an important issue. I was able to pass background checks for long guns. We had to come override the governor's veto. We're able to do things at a local level. And as Josh said, the things that we do affect your daily life, whether it's education or, where supermarkets or alcohol can be sold, or next year, the legalization of marijuana is going to be huge. So these things are, I think, really important. And I also think as bad as it is we're not able to be together and that energy is lost. I think this has been a great opportunity for people to watch. You can watch our voting sessions online. You can watch all of our hearings. You can watch the floor session, just, have it on in the background as my mother does while you're doing whatever, working or cleaning or whatever, So in that sense, it's a lot more accessible, I think, to people.
No, absolutely. Because I know there've been a couple of committees that I've been able to watch, live streamed on YouTube. And certainly I think that has been an advantage of this year with technology, is there's an opportunity for more to get involved in the process. I know even we've talked about it from a chamber perspective. It's oftentimes difficult for a business owner, excuse me, to give up, perhaps 45 minutes. And this is coming from Howard County. 45-minute drive to Annapolis to sit in a 3-hour meeting for 2 minutes of testimony.
Right.
And if you're coming from, Garrett County or the Eastern Shore, it's a day, and so certainly this has allowed for greater participation. Just maybe one other thing that and it's not necessarily a business matter per se, but I know it's been a topic that I wanted to ask you about, because I know you've been working on it for at least 2 or 3 years now, and that's your emancipation bill, and because that is also something that continues to, and again, I think it just speaks to, as Josh touched on it earlier, the fact that certainly I think you've taken up a number of family or family related bills, or things that at least impact youth, impact families, and so forth. So kind of just talk about maybe that and so forth.
So this is the 6th year that
Sixth. Wow. Okay.
that I have brought this legislation. There was a great op-ed about it in the Capitol Gazette the other day by some Johns Hopkins physicians supporting the legislation. So it has passed the House. I have in years, I mean, the goal was to make it so that you have to be 18 to get married, because right now you have to be 15, 16, or 17 with pregnancy exception. So you're pregnant, or you've had it, or you're going to have a child, and or your parents basically take you to the clerk of the court and say you're going to get married. We've had the clerk of the court from Anne Arundel County say we should not be put in this position. I've had a lot of girl groups who've they've graduated from high school and they're in college from Howard County have come and to testify in support of the bill. The Catholic Conference, just a variety of folks that support the legislation, because the studies show again, and it happens here in Maryland, that it's not this teen on teen love that people romanticize about. It is young girls that are essentially being sold off to an older man, more than twice their age for whatever reason, financial reasons, drugs, abuse, and they end up in these horribly abusive situations. And so the point is, it's a child rights bill also in my eyes as well. And so I've gotten it out in the past. 18 bright line, you can get married. I mean, that was a fight. We've since put emancipation in it. Maryland doesn't have an emancipation statute, which some states do. And so I think there are certain reasons why a kid might want to be emancipated. But this year, this legislation says that if you are emancipated at the age of 17 by the court, which determines that you can sufficiently take care of yourself, you still, are required to abide by going to school. You still can't buy alcohol, tobacco, all the things that your age for criminal purposes, you're still juvenile. But if you can meet these parameters and satisfy, the judge has essentially an interview with you, no one else. And the judge is satisfied that it's in your best interest to get married, then you can get married. So I'm hoping that it passes the Senate. As you can imagine, there are lots of folks who say, my great grandmother got married at 16. Well, so did mine. But now we know so many more things about human trafficking and abuse and how we need to protect children. And certainly we have had so many experts come in front of our committee when we talk about juvenile justice reform that say, look, our brains aren't even matured until we're about 24, 25. So certainly we shouldn't be on one hand saying you can't drink, you can't even have tobacco till you're 21, but you can go ahead and be 15 and get married and not be able to file for a divorce on your own. You can't rent an apartment or get a lease. You can't enter into contracts. You're not old enough to go into a shelter. So you can be stuck in this horrible situation that you can't even get out of because of your age. You can for medical purposes, you could be essentially the ward of your spouse who's older because you're underage. So they control what happens to you medically, which puts a lot of women in a bad situation. So I have to go to 4. Thanks. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Okay. I'm being called to the floor. So I'm hoping that this is the last year I have to bring it up, but this is the 6th year. And Senator Sarah Elfreth has took it up with me last year and has just been on fire about it in the Senate. So hopefully we can get it passed.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you, for your passion for families and for particularly for our youth. And I've been watching the clock myself, and so I know we've got to wrap up so you can get to the floor. But just want to thank you for sharing with us this morning, and again for your service to Howard County. And Josh, any closing remarks?
No, thank you, delegates. Pleasure.
Thank you.
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
And we will see you soon. All right,
thank
take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, this will wrap up Policy Matters, and this is actually our last segment for this session. And so hopefully you have enjoyed getting a chance to hear from members of the Howard County General Assembly over these last several weeks. Certainly want to thank Josh and Comcast for their continued support of the chamber and our initiatives here. And so we'll come back actually on May 4th, which will be in a different format, and that will actually be the chamber's what we call Regs and Eggs. and that is our legislative wrap-up breakfast, where we'll talk about a host of the bills, particularly that have been introduced and in some cases passed, or maybe that didn't pass, but that would have an impact on the business community. So stay tuned for that. In addition, you might even see Policy Matters continue sometime in the summer as we continue to bring insights from our elected officials to you, our Howard County businesses and interested parties. So again, thank you to Josh and Comcast, and enjoy the rest of your day.